What are the signs of sex addiction? Let's talk about it. In this video, I'm going to talk about signs of sex addiction that a lot of people don't look for, but you'll be able to notice them and realize that they're there once I talk about them. And some of them might surprise you. Before we even talk about the signs of sex addiction, let's talk about whether or not sex addiction is real or not. Now, you can hop on the internet, you can find all kinds of information. And like most things on the internet, whatever you're looking for, you'll find. You'll find evidence that sex addiction is real. You'll find evidence that sex addiction is not real, and it's actually destructive to call sex an addiction. Now, here's my thing, is I want you to take a step back and just ask yourself, am I doing a behavior in my life that is causing me destruction? And I don't want to do it, but I do it anyways. Whether we call that an addiction or not, that's a compulsive behavior that's causing you problems. Now, that could be doing drugs. It could be eating too much food, or it could be sex. I think we get a little too caught up in the words on what things are, and we need to take a step back and just look at the consequences of our behaviors. First off, is sex addiction even real? Okay, I'm going to get a little bit clinical here with you and talk like a therapist, but hang in there with me because I'm making a point. So in our diagnostic criteria manual, it's called the DSM, you can look at what constitutes an addiction. And if you're looking at substance abuse, you'll find things like rate and duration of use, tolerance, compulsivity, things like that. If you read through substance abuse dependence and the criteria for that, it's pretty clear to diagnose somebody with a substance use disorder. So if you look at sex, sex is different than shooting up heroin or drinking a 12-pack of beer. However, there's certain criteria that are very similar to drugs and alcohol. With sex, tolerance builds up. Rate and duration of use can actually be measured, and we can look at how much time you're spending. When I talk about tolerance, what I'm talking about is you're pushing more and more limits. At first, you might just be looking at pornography. Then all of a sudden, you're chatting with people online. Next thing you know, you're at strip clubs. And then you're meeting up with people and having sex with people. Now, for some people, that tolerance builds up quickly. For some people, it's a very slow progression. But tolerance does build up. You're going to push those limits further and further. Sex is a natural thing for human beings. Sex is not a bad thing. The difference between sex and heroin is it's built within us to have sex. That's an important part of life. Food can also be an addiction. If I'm eating way too many cheeseburgers and I know it's not good for me, but I can't stop, it's an addiction. Sex is the same way. These are process addictions, things that come to us naturally, but we're using them to numb out our emotions. We're using them to escape life, and we're using them in a way that causes compulsive behaviors. It causes destruction in our lives. All right, so we've talked about whether sex addiction is real or not. Let's talk about what are the signs of sex addiction if you are struggling. One, the obvious one, is compulsive behaviors. Is doing things that you don't really want to do, but you do them anyways, and you push limits. Another sign is poor emotion regulation. So what I mean by that is you have a hard time dealing with your emotions. You're using sex, you're using lust to numb life out, and you're not learning how to cope. And so when things come up, you're going to be volatile, or you're going to be shut down when it comes to your emotions. Another sign is extreme and dangerous behaviors, pushing limits. Okay? Another sign of sex addiction is attachment problems. You're not going to have healthy relationships if you're struggling with a sex addiction because you're going to be in a lot of denial. You're going to be justifying a lot of behaviors. If you find yourself struggling with compulsive behaviors, you're struggling in your relationship to connect in a healthy way, you're pushing limits, then I want you to know that there is hope. You can get help. Addiction is a mental health disorder, but addiction is a disease that can be treated. You can find recovery. But you've got to be willing to face the reality that you're struggling with the addiction in order to start in to get the help that you need. We talked about the signs of sex addiction. I want you to go watch my video, How Can I Stop Being a Sex Addict? And that will give you more pointers about recovery and working your way out of this addiction.